Hello, in this video we're going to be looking at the Wavetable synth in Ableton Live 10. So this is brand new to Live 10. Live 9 we didn't have this synth. It's a Wavetable synth, so we can actually control the synth a lot more with the Wavetable. It's similar to, say, Serum, if you used Serum before. But if you haven't, don't worry, I'm going to show you in this lecture how you can actually use this Wavetable synth. So I've just drawn in some chords here, just some basic chords. And then I've opened up the Wavetable synth. So here we go. We basically have a couple of oscillators going through a couple of filters and then being modulated by a couple of envelopes and some LFOs. At first, this can look quite intimidating, especially when you click on the matrix. It can be like, what is going on? But I'm going to go through step by step how you can actually use this synth. So let's go through. On the left, we have a sub. So this is a sub octave below. We can control the gain, we can control the tone, we can control the octave. Without the sub. Controlling the tone. We can transpose it if we want. For now, we're going to turn the sub off, but that's basically the sub. It's just a sub oscillator, so you can control the gain, the tone, get some nice, interesting sounds with the tone. So with this basic sine wave over here, I'm sure you're used to this sound. We can go through the different types of wave. So we have a sine wave, triangle, square, and sawtooth. The basic 4 waves. And this dial here just allows us to go between these different ones. So I recommend just going through and experimenting. This can produce a lot of gain, so I'd actually turn this down quite a bit on live. This is under the category basics. We have several different ones: collection, complex, distortion, filter, etc. Then we have basic shapes, and there's loads of different ones we can actually go through. So we can click through and choose different shapes, or we can just use this arrow here, and you'll notice straight away that there are a lot more waves, and it looks a lot more complex. So we can get a kind of more complex sound from this. So this is under the harmonic series. You'll notice here it changes from kind of a sine wave more of a square wave. And we have a different view here. So we have the more list style view of the waves changing, or we have the circular view. There is no other stock synth in Ableton Live 10 that's really anything like this. This means instead of a simple periodic waveform, like I said before, sine, triangle, square, and saw, we have a whole collection of tables, and this is why it's called Wavetable. Tables are combinations of different waveforms that can really just morph through the sound. It also has a global waveform morph control, which is this over here. I recommend just going through and experimenting to start off with. If you haven't used a Wavetable synth before, it's so much fun. Just experiment and go through all the different sounds and try and hear the different wave sounds. So there really is a whole variety of different wave sounds here. First of all, is just go through and experiment. Retro, for example. Choose this one. Quite a simple one. So when you actually move this morph control, you're recalculating the waveform as it's being generated. You can also grab on our filter. So I'm just going to play this now. We'll change the frequency. We'll cut out a lot of the highs because this is a low pass, which means it allows the lows and cuts the highs. Change the resonance, which adds a bit of a peak at the cutoff point. Add a bit of a boost at the cutoff. I generally like to get the synth sounding good before I add filters and effects, But you can always add the filter. Filter is a great effect. It's a great way to cut out some of these high sounds or maybe low sounds, sculpt the sound into something more that you're after. And of course, we do have another filter as well. We have different types here. Let's change this to a high pass. So what a high pass does is it allows the highs and cuts the lows. So we're only really allowing this mid frequency of waves at the moment. We can sculpt it and change it around, but I'm just going to have the low pass for now. Okay, moving on. This is the bit that looks a bit more tricky. We have something called a matrix, so we can really go in and sculpt what's going on. So we have a matrix. This looks a bit more complex, but it gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of customization for our synth sound. We can really add some modulation with the LFOs, which stands for low frequency oscillator. So we can basically make the sound go fast or slow in a really simple way of putting it. So let's change the oscillator one position. And here you can see the wave moving up and down through the LFO. We have a second LFO as well. Just double click to go back to 0. And if we go on the mod source, so modulation source, and we click on LFO, we can actually change the amount and the rate and the shape and the offsets. I generally like to sync this to the clock of the project rather than time amount, rather than 1 hertz. So I'm going to click on this little picture of a note here, and then we can just really sync it to a time value. Let's choose 1/8, keep it simple. An amount, 100% shape, so we can choose the different types of waves. Let's just choose a sine wave to start with, and then go back to matrix. And you'll notice now it's actually locked to 1/8. So if we turn on the metronome up here, and then we add some LFO, you can hear it syncs up to the clock of the tempo. You can add modulation onto another one, say amp. So this is the overall volume really. It's going to be adding a low frequency oscillator. Of course, we can go back to mod sources and click on LFO2. This doesn't have to be the same rate. Let's change this to 1/6 notes. Then go back to matrix, and then we can add on LFO2. So this is changing the oscillator 1 position. So this is changing the position of the wave. Let's change this to amp as well. You'll notice it's creating something a little bit more unique now. So we have LFO going on 1/8 notes and also LFO going on 1/6 notes. So you can create something quite interesting. Double click to go back. Same with the pitch. Be careful of the pitch because it can sound maybe a little too wacky. But it depends what sound you're after. If you want a crazy kind of intro or some weird sound effects, you could add a low frequency oscillator onto the pitch. But my favorite one here is actually the oscillator 1 position. So you can go through the position of the waves at a certain rate, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so that's the basics of the Wavetable synth. I recommend just going in now and playing around with the different oscillators. So we have the sub oscillator, oscillator 1. We haven't really looked at oscillator 2 yet. We have the filter. We've started to look at mod source and matrix. The next lecture, we're going to dig even deeper and look at the Wavetable synth in more detail. So thank you for watching this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.